Hello guys, welcome back. In this Jetpack Compose tutorial, we're going to create a multi-floating action button. Basically, we have a floating action button that when clicked, it expands to more buttons that are clickable and can navigate or perform other action. So for example, here, when we click this button, it's going to rotate here and bring up this. And also we can easily press this button for this simple purpose. We're going to show here a custom message. And also when we click this, it's going to perform another action. So for that case here, you can also collapse this. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, now let's get started. Here we're going to create a new composable, and this composable you're going to call this main screen. So inside this main screen here, we're going to create a scaffold which we are going to display our floating action button. So now, basically here we're using a scaffold, which is the slot API and can easily just be used to place this floating action button. So without this, it can be really difficult to display a floating action button, which you have to do it manually. Now, after that, here now we can create another composable, and this one we're going to call it this multi. Okay, now basically here we are going to create our multi floating action button. And now we want to create a state that can represent that we are either expanded or collapsed. So for this case here, we can create another enum class here. Okay, now here we can have a state either expanded. Now we can create here, because we're going to host this state. So we're going to create another state here. So we are going to call this. So now here, what we want to acquire here, we want to get this multi-floating button state. So we are getting here the state, and after that here we can create another event that can easily change this state. Okay, now here inside you can create a normal floating action button. And we want to pass in here a modifier. And we're going to use this rotate so that we can easily rotate this. Now, for this case here, we want to create a variable that can easily rotate this. And for that case here, now we can create and use update transition, which is an animation API that can easily use to animate different aspects on one object simultaneously. So for this case here, now we can create another variable, and then we can call this. And here basically we can pass in the target state, and our target state, this one is going to be multi-floating state, and we can pass in here a label. So this label is going to be used when you are using your preview function, and you can easily preview inside the adversity and differentiate between different animations. So for here case, we can write just transition. Okay, now here we can create another variable, and this one we can to call it rotate. So we want to animate here a float, and we can pass also here a label. And we can call this rotate. Now, here we are getting the floating state, so we can use this multi-floating state to change between different ways or animating between different ways. So here basically we can use this multi-floating state if this one is going to be equal to, if it is expanded here, we want to rotate this 315 degrees. So basically here we are going to rotate 315 degrees, or you can use here 45 if you want just a simple rotation here. And after that, we can pass in here else, and we can pass in 0f. So we can just return to a normal position when this is going to be in a collapsed state. In that case here, we can pass in here the rotate. Okay, now inside here, the on click, we want to use the update transition to check the states, and we can easily animate between these two different states. So what we can use here, we can use this on multi-state change here, and inside here now we can use the if statement so that we can easily transition between these two states. Okay, now here we can use so we want to check within this if it's going to be expanded. So if this state is going to be expanded, we want to pass in here collapsed. Okay, I think we are done here creating this first, the simple rotation here. So inside this floating action button here, we can call our, and here we can pass in here multi-floating states. And here we can change our state by calling the, okay, so I think we are done here. So we can just come here to main activity and we can call that main screen inside here. Okay, now let's try and run our application and see if the rotation actually happens. Okay, now the app is launched and we have forgotten to add here an icon. So let's do this inside here, the components. And we can just come inside this floating action button. Inside here now we can add the icon. Okay, now here we can pass in the image vector. So we can use the icons. And basically here we have to pass in the modifier. And we want to rotate this instead of rotating the modifier here. So we can just delete this, the floating action button. Okay, now let's test here application. And when we click this floating action button, it rotates to this expanded state and it's going to return to the collapsed state. So now let's create the other floating action button, which are going to be displayed above here. Now let's create here a mini floating action button composable. So we are going to call this min fab. And this one is going to be a minimal floating action button. Now we can create here another class, which is going to hold up everything which we want to use then inside our minimal floating action button. So we can create another class, and inside this class here, we can call this minifab item. So here we want to have first an icon, which we can use to draw inside our composable. And this one, we can use the image bitmap. And after that, here we can pass in the label, which we are going to use it inside, for example, displaying the text or the label of this icon. And after that, here now we can display also the identifier. So we can easily differentiate between different lists. So this one is going to be like an ID of this fab item here. So after that, here now, this one is going to have the fab item. Okay, so we are going to react to this when it's going to be clicked. So for this case here, we're going to create a canvas. Okay, now also here we want to make this clickable. So here we're going to pass in the interaction sources, and we can use the mutable interaction sources. And here basically we can pass in the on-click listener now so that we can react to these clicks. So here we are going to pass in this, and we can invoke this function here and can pass in the item. Okay, now what we have to do here, we can create, inside this canvas here, we can draw a cycle. And here we can create the bottom color. So inside the canvas, we cannot easily access the composables. So we have to create the button color outside this. So we're going to use this secondary color. And here we have to pass in the radius. So we are going to have 36 dp. So for now we add 36f. So for now here we are just hard coding this value, but later here we are going to use the animation so that we can easily animate this. So after we draw cycle here, now we can try to draw the image by using the image bitmap. Okay, so we have to add here value so we can easily access these variables. And now inside here, now we can use the icon. And now we are going to use the canvas center. So we want to offset this. So we are going to use the icon width. So we have to divide this by 2 so that we can center this. And also here now we can change this from X to Y. So basically, I think here we are done. We have created this, and here we have to run the image. And for now, we can use this canvas to draw the floating action button. So you can just get really creative here and create any shapes which you want. Now, for this case here, we have already created this mini floating action button. So what we have to do now inside here, we can just pass the items inside the multi floating action button, and we can pass in a list. So here we are passing a list of floating action buttons. And now inside here, we can use this. And we want to surround this inside the column so that we can display them inside the column. So what we have to do, you can press Ctrl Alt J here, and we have to surround this with a column. Now, basically here we want also this to center it. We can use the horizontal arrangement, and we can align it to end. Okay, now inside here, we can use the if statement so that we can just check if we are in expanded or collapsed state. So we can use the transition, and we can check if we are in the expanded state. So if we are in expanded state here, we can use the items, and we can loop around here. And here we have the on-click listener, which we can easily respond when we have certain clicks. And here we have the min-fab items, which you can use it to react to these button clicks. Now, for that case here, now we have to come inside here. Now we have to pass in the items. So we can easily create this variable here. And here we have a min-fab item. So for here we have the icon which we are using here, a image resource. So this one is going to convert back to the image bitmap. And here we are passing label and the unique identifier. So we can just okay, and inside here now we can pass in the items which we have easily created there. Now let's try rerun our application and see the changes we have made. Okay, now we can try here to check this button if we can enter into the expanded state, and we can do that. And basically here we have forgotten to add this little bit of spacer here in order to make this not overlapping. So we can just come inside here, this mini floating action button inside the items for each. We can just add here a spacer. But now let's try to rerun to the app and see. Now let's press this button here, and as you can see here now they are arranged really good, and when we press this button here, it's going to respond to our clicks, but not showing the trust. And if you look closely here, these buttons here, they appear and disappear just like from nothing. So we can try to customize this behavior by adding a little bit of background and also scaling. And also, as you can see here, they're just here. So we can add a shadow, and also we could animate this entering and exiting. And also we could add here a label. So let's do this here now. Okay, now we can add here another animations. So we can just come inside here and we can create another variable. So first and foremost, we want to scale the tabs. So those tabs, they just don't appear and disappear from nothing. So we can just scale them. So we can call this upscale. So if we are in expanded state, we want this to be 36 0 size, and else we are going to just have 0f. So for that, we have created here upscale. And also here we can create another variable, which is going to be alpha. And this one is going to just act as a fade in and fade out animation. So okay, so inside here we are using a transition spec, so we want this to last only 15 milliseconds. And for that we can check. And here you want this to be fully visible, as this one is going to just fade out to 0f. Now also we can just duplicate this. And instead of alpha here, we are going to create a text shadow. And here, basically, we want to animate DP. Okay, now we can polish here our midi-fab by adding, for example, the shadow and also adding the label. So first and foremost here, we want to create a shadow inside this draw cycle here. So we want to create another cycle. So first and foremost, we can add here our variables, which we're going to use then. And by default, we can assign this to be true. Okay, now we have these variables here. So inside here, our draw cycle, we can create. And also here we can get a color. So for example, here we can. Okay, so basically we're using here black and decreasing its opacity. So we can pass in here the color. And here we can use the fab scale. So also this one is going to scale and disappear by using the other cycle here also. And we can try to offset this. So we can use the center. Okay, now instead also here to hard code this, we can use f upscale also here so that we can scale and going together with this another cycle here. So I think here we are done with the canvas. What we can do here also, we can pass in alpha. So also we want this one to fade in and fade out. So we can use that alpha, which we have created up there so that we can use it to fade in and fade out this image here. Now, I think after that, we can just collapse this and we can surround this inside the row. So here we can create a text, which is going to be our label. So here, basically, we are passing a label, so we can give here the font size. And we can make this bold. Now, after that, here now we can pass in a modifier. So here we're going to pass in the alpha. So what we want here, we want to animate. Okay, so basically here we are creating a state and then we are going to animate this state. Okay, now here we can add the shadow and we can use the text shadow, which is going to create a shadow on the background. And also here now we can pass in the background. So we can use here material theme. Okay, and here we can add a little bit of a spacer and here we can pass in 16 dp. Okay, now we want this text here to be shown only if the label is going to be true. So for this case, we can surround all of this. We can use an if statement. So if show label, then we show our label and we can pass in here this text. So basically when this one is going to be true, so we are going to show the text, and otherwise we are just going to show the button. This looks perfect. Now we can come here to this minifab here where we are getting error, so we can try to pass in here. So okay, now this looks good. We can try to rerun our application and see if the changes are made. Okay, now when we click here, it's going to show up together with the label, and also we have all of these buttons here and a little bit of shadow here. And also when we click here, it's going to disappear. Now what has remained here is when we try to click this button here, nothing is going to be showing up. So we can try to show a toast, or if you want to navigate to another screens, you can use this to navigate. Okay, now here we can try to use this minifab item in order to respond to clicks. But first here we did hard code these values here about the identifier. So we can create here another enum class for example here. Okay, now here we have three classes here, attachment, camera, and notes. So instead here of passing this, we can use the identifier. So we can navigate to this here. So we can just rename this. And we can use here a when statement, and we can pass in this minifab item and use the identifier. And now we can respond differently using different fabs. Now here we can create a variable. Then pass in another variable here. For example, we can pass in context, which you can use it to show a toast. And you can just try to navigate here by using the navigation. So for example, if you want to navigate to another screen or to perform a certain function, for example, you can just press it inside here. Now for that case here, we can just, and we have to import this. And here we have to pass in the context. Okay, so when we obtain the context, so we can pass in here the context. And let's try and build the application and see the output. Now let's test here our clicks buttons. Now, when you click this, it's going to show up the attachment. And also when you're going to click this, it's going to show a toast message for the camera. So for now, let's leave it here. See you in the next video.